Hello, I am attorney Masa Sam Foray, owner of the Foray firm with offices in Chicago and Houston, and I am back again today to talk to you about all things related to immigration. So today's question is, can you define the different categories of individuals who would be seeking immigration visa applications? And so there are different categories, obviously, of status in the United States, and therefore different categories of individuals who would be seeking to submit I-130 applications. Specifically, let's start with citizens. United States citizens are a very distinct class of individuals. We have rights that other people don't have. We have opportunities that other people don't have. And we're treated differently in the USCIS immigration processing system because of our status as citizens. Now, there are different ways to become a U.S. citizen. You could have been born off the shores of the United States, but born to U.S. citizen parents. You could have come to the United States on a visa and then made your pathway to lawful permanent residency and then ultimately to citizenship after 3 to 5 years, depending on your circumstances. And for the most part, citizens who are born on the shores of the United States or to U.S. citizens abroad versus citizens who naturalize through the visa process are treated very similarly. Nevertheless, for purposes of immigration, if you look at some of my other videos, there are a number of different rights and routes that are available to U.S. citizens that are not available to any other category of individuals. Two examples that come to mind primarily would be the K-1 fiancé visa, otherwise known as the 90-day visa. That is not a route that is available to anybody other than U.S. citizens. Another one would be sponsoring one's siblings. So sponsoring siblings to come here on a family-based petition is not a right or an option that's available to anybody other than a U.S. citizen. So on the hierarchy of categories or classifications of individuals for purposes of immigration, definitely U.S. citizens are at the top, followed by people with permanent residency. But there are multiple types of permanent residency. You could have conditional permanent residency, and that is one, by way of example, for instance, that fiancés or spouses who come here on a spousal-based visa obtain. That conditional permanent residency is something that lasts for 2 years. It expires after 2 years, and prior to the expiration of your 2-year green card, presumably, and under the best of circumstances, both spouses will jointly file to lift the conditions so that they can go on to have the 10-year permanent residency or lawful permanent residency. So when you have lawful permanent residency or a 10-year green card, that's something that people get, and they may maintain that status for the rest of their lives. There are many people who don't want to give up citizenship in their own country, but they are working and living a life here in the United States. They live here continually for decades. And so they don't see any reason to go from lawful permanent residency to citizenship. In my own life, my parents are prime examples of that. My parents were here for over 40 years. The vast majority they came here initially on F1 student visas in the early 70s, but they lived for the majority of their time in the United States as lawful permanent residents. It wasn't until later on in life when they knew they wanted to spend more time coming and going between here and Sierra Leone, where they're originally from, that they decided to go on ahead and make the change from lawful permanent resident to U.S. citizen. So they're sort of the second tier. And the reason why these two are very similar is because, just an easy example, when you walk through any customs, any border patrol, you walk into any airport, when you deboard in the United States, you see one line for whom? U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, or you see the sign will say citizens and green card holders, and everybody else goes to the left. And so permanent residents are sort of the second tier. So they have the second most rights as far as the expansive rights and the visas that are available to them under USCIS. After that, you have non-immigrants. So non-immigrants are people who are here lawfully. A good example of that would be For instance, F1 student visas, B2 tourism visas. So people who come here on tourism visas, people who come here on student visas, they have affirmed in their applications that they are not moving to the United States permanently and that they are coming for a very specific purpose, either to attend school or, to come for holiday or for a vacation. And so even though they're in the United States lawfully, they are not undocumented, they still don't have the expansive rights that green card holders or U.S. citizens have. And then lastly, we have undocumented immigrants. So the one thing I want to point out about this category, especially in this day and age, there's so much fodder in the news, particularly under this administration, about the evils and the dangers of, illegal immigration and undocumented citizens. In actual fact, most undocumented citizens, or at least half, of undocumented citizens, are people who came to the United States lawfully. So they came in that prior category. They came as non-immigrants, maybe on F1 visas, or they came on B2 tourism visas. And then once they got here, they overstayed their I-94 and their passport that said they had to leave the country by X date, or that even though they had a 10-year multiple entry visa, they had to leave, they could not be here for more than 6 months at a time. So they somehow violated the terms of their original visa, or the terms of their original visa are no longer applicable, like a student who came on an F1 visa, but who is no longer enrolled in school. So, when we use this term undocumented, immigrants or illegal immigrants, it has a lot of connotations. And because of the sensationalization of this in the news, there's sort of this picture that, many Americans will immediately draw to mind about what, these people look like. But in actual fact, there are a lot of people who aren't paying attention to their documents, or maybe just aren't fully informed and educated about the nature of the visa that they have in coming to the United States and their obligations under those visas. And so they quickly find themselves in the category of being undocumented or illegal. So now that we've identified the different categories, citizens, lawful permanent residents, non-immigrants, and undocumented or illegal immigrants, I just want to point out a couple of different, pointers to take away about the different categories. Number one, I've already pointed out in this video and some other prior videos that you can look at that conditional green cards have a shelf life. Conditional green cards are not to be taken lightly, because a conditional green card, once it expires, it's like any other visa. Once it is expired, you are here unlawfully. And so you could actually be detained and removed. ICE could come even if you came here on a lawful fiancé visa and then lawfully went ahead and turned that fiancé visa into your conditional green card. Even if you were still married, but you have no permanent green card and you have no valid conditional green card. So please pay attention to your documentation and don't put yourself in a situation where you go from being lawful and documented to undocumented because of ignorance or a failure to stay informed about your rights and your obligations pursuant to your particular visa. Prior to the expiration of your green card, and this is, to this point, you need to submit your I-751 application. So that I-751 application, once you submit it, you will receive a receipt for the submission of that document. Using that I-751 in addition to your expired conditional green card and keeping those two documents together is going to, go a long ways in ensuring that you will not be detained by ICE and certainly that you will not be removed. As long as you have proof that you have timely submitted your application to remove the conditions, even if that application is pending for another 6 months or 12 months afterwards, then having those two documents together is going to make sure that you don't find yourself on the receiving end of an ICE detention or a notice to appear for removal proceedings. In addition to that, note that even if you come here as a non-immigrant, you still have a pathway to citizenship. If you come on a non-immigrant visa, and again, the examples that I've given would be if you came on an F1 student visa or if you came here on a B2 tourism visa. You still are able to go from a non-immigrant visa to an immigrant visa, but you have to file the proper paperwork, and you need to make sure you know where you must be located in order to adjust your status. An example of this that I've given in prior videos would be, let's say you came on an F1 student visa and then you met somebody in college, and this person that you met is a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident, and they want to sponsor you as a spouse. As long as your F1 student visa is still pending, you can remain in the United States while your green card petition is pending or your marriage-based petition is pending. But if your F1 student visa has expired, then you're going to have to go out of the United States because you have no lawful reason to be in the US in order to process the application. And that's the rule. There may be some exceptions, but that is the rule. So just know that if your ultimate goal in coming to the United States is for you to be able to find a pathway to citizenship, even if you don't realize that when you initially submit your tourism visa or your F1 visa, there may still be options for you, but you're going to want to make sure that you reach out to a trusted immigration attorney who can show you the lawful pathway towards citizenship. And then finally, undocumented immigrants, again, have been all over the news and painted in quite a negative light, unfortunately, particularly under this administration. A lot of, people, therefore, say that they're the reason for, jobs being taken away, and they're the reason why, the healthcare system is overtaxed and public aid system is overtasked, but the bottom line is undocumented immigrants have always been a part of U.S. history. They are part of the fabric of the United States, and they're a part of the fabric of our workforce in a way that is immeasurable and irreplaceable. Nevertheless, if you are undocumented, but you came here as a child, even though the 2014, you've heard of DACA, you've heard of Dreamers, right? DACA being the Deferred Action or the Deferred Act for Childhood Arrivals, DACA. And so, Dreamers are people who came here as youth. They have spent the majority of their time in the United States. They clearly have ties here to the U.S. because they were brought here as children, or they came as unaccompanied minor, but as children. So that means that they have access to schools. They are, lawfully abiding citizens and young adults in many cases at this point in time. But because they came here without papers, they still don't have papers. And so a lot of the information that the media is feeding us is, again, asking us to be scared of, Dreamers overtaxing, the United States resources, and be scared and be concerned about Dreamers who came here unlawfully, who now want to, use a backdoor into citizenship. If you are a dreamer, if you are an unaccompanied minor, if you are somebody who has more ties to the United States than you have to your original country of origin, make sure you reach out to a trusted immigration official or attorney who will be able to advise you about your rights and about your options. Even though there has been a lot of news coverage about DACA, especially a lot of fear amongst immigrant communities about what this current administration was going to do to DACA and what this current administration was going to do to Dreamers. The fact is, as we sit here, as of April 2020, DACA is still good law. And so if you're in this category, you still have options, you still have rights. You have human rights. And so I hope this video has encouraged you, and I hope that you have found it to be helpful. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.